Sometimes silence enters our lives not as a punishment, but as a message. When two people who once talked endlessly go quiet at the very same moment, it isn't a coincidence. It is communication happening without words. Silence has a language of its own, a depth of its own, a truth of its own. And when two hearts stop speaking at the same time, 5 powerful things begin to unfold beneath the surface. First, silence reveals what words were hiding. You start to see what was real, what was broken, what was missing, and what was taken for granted. Silence becomes a mirror showing you the truth you tried to run from. Second, silence slows everything down so emotions can finally catch up. In the noise of daily life, feelings get buried, but when everything becomes quiet, the heart speaks the loudest. You begin to hear the pain, the love, the disappointment, and sometimes the hope that still lives inside you. Third, silence tests the connection. A bond that breaks in silence was already weak. A bond that survives silence was always strong, because silence tells you who is willing to return and who was only there for convenience. Fourth, silence forces reflection, that you start seeing your own patterns, the things you could have done better, the limits you ignored, the boundaries you needed. Silence becomes the teacher that delivers tough lessons gently. And fifth, silence prepares the future. Whether you drift apart or find your way back, silence becomes the bridge. It heals, it cleans, it resets, and sometimes it opens the door for a new beginning with them or without them. So if you both went silent at the same time, don't fear it. Don't rush at it. Sit with it. Learn from it. Let it guide you, because silence is not empty. It is full of answers. Silence, in its deepest form, becomes the most honest reflection two people can ever face. Because when voices stop, emotions begin to speak, and when conversations end, reality begins to rise. Silence, especially when shared by two individuals at the same moment, acts like a clear, calm mirror. One that does not lie, does not soften the truth, and does not protect you from what you need to see. Instead, it forces you to confront everything that noise once kept hidden, everything that distraction once covered, and everything that routine once blurred. When you both go silent at the same time, it's not just a pause, it's not just a break, it's not just distance, is a mirror being placed between you, reflecting your actions, your reactions, your intentions, and your emotional reality. Silence shows you the difference between what you felt and what you said, between what you wanted and what you settled for, between what you deserved and what you accepted. In the quiet, all illusions fade and all truths become visible. Silence reveals what your heart was whispering all along, but your mind kept avoiding. It uncovers whether your connection was built on genuine understanding or temporary convenience, whether love was still alive or slowly fading, whether trust was strong enough to survive storms or fragile enough to crumble in stillness. The mirror of silence does not reflect faces. It reflects feelings, it reflects patterns, it reflects emotional wounds that were never addressed and longing that was never expressed. In silence, the heart begins to speak in its rawest form. You start hearing your own truth. The truth you hid beneath laughter, the truth you buried under routines, the truth you covered with arguments and explanations. The mirror of silence shows you why you were hurting, why you were holding on, why you were afraid, and why you were trying so hard to control what was already slipping away. You begin to realize that many times words were not communication, they were protection, they were avoidance, they were excuses. But silence is pure, silence is sharp, silence is honest. You also begin to see yourself through the eyes of the other person. How your actions affected them, how your silence wounded them, how your presence healed them, and how your absence changed them. You see the emotional weight you carried and the emotional weight you caused. You see the unspoken expectations, the unmet needs, the fragile boundaries, and the silent disappointments. Silence becomes a lens that magnifies what was too small to notice and illuminates what was too dark to recognize. And beyond everything, silence becomes the mirror that reflects the level of importance you truly hold in each other's lives. When the silence is filled with longing, it means the bond was real. When the silence is filled with peace, it means the chapter may be closing. When silence hurts, it means feelings were deeper than you admitted. When silence heals, it means you were hurting more than you realized. The mirror of silence captures all of this without judgment, without pressure, without noise. Silence is not empty. Silence is not meaningless. Silence is not accidental. Silence is the universe slowing your world down so you can finally see what you refuse to acknowledge. It is life giving you a moment to breathe, to understand, to observe, and to feel. Silence shared by two people simultaneously becomes the most powerful mirror of all. It's a mirror that reveals what was real, what was broken, what was beautiful, what was painful, and what must be accepted. In the end, silence reflects the truth you needed, not the truth you wanted, and sometimes that is the greatest gift life can offer. Silence, when shared between two people at the same moment, becomes more than an absence of words, more than a pause in conversation, more than distance between two hearts. It becomes an emotional reset, a moment where everything slows down, where the heart begins to breathe again, and where all the emotions you tried to outrun finally catch up with you. Silence, gentle yet powerful, becomes the space where truth reorganizes itself, where feelings realign, and where clarity begins to rise slowly, quietly, consistently. In the rush of everyday life, emotions are often pushed aside, ignored, buried, or postponed. We get so lost in routine, in responsibilities, in arguments, in expectations, that we stop listening to how we truly feel. But when silence enters, especially when both people go quiet at the same exact time, it creates a moment of emotional stillness, a landscape where nothing is rushing, nothing is demanding, nothing is competing. In that calm space, the heart finally finds room to speak, room to breathe, room to reorganize the chaos that accumulated through unspoken frustrations, unhealed wounds, and misunderstood feelings. Silence becomes the emotional reset button that life presses for you when you refuse to press it yourself. It stops you from reacting too fast, speaking too harshly, or holding on too tightly. It gives your mind the chance to step back, your heart the chance to recover, and your soul the chance to observe without noise clouding your vision. When silence enters, it removes the pressure to respond, to explain, to defend, or to justify. Instead, it creates a blank canvas, a fresh space where emotions can settle, where clarity can form, and where responses become wiser and more grounded. During this reset, old feelings that were buried under daily stress begin to rise. You start to finally feel what you were avoiding. The disappointment you never admitted, the fear you never shared, the love you never expressed properly, the hurt you never acknowledged, and the confusion you tried to hide. Silence does not bring new emotions. It reveals the ones that were already there, waiting for a moment of stillness to finally be seen. It is in silence that the emotional truth surfaces, raw, honest, and unfiltered. Silence also allows you to separate temporary emotions from long-term truths. Anger feels smaller in silence. Love feels clearer in silence. Disappointment feels real in silence, and boundaries become visible in silence. What felt overwhelming in the moment becomes understandable when everything is calm. What felt confusing becomes simple. What felt urgent becomes less important. Silence resets your emotional lenses, allowing you to see the situation with a clearer, deeper perspective. Without the influence of ego, pride, or fear, this emotional reset also helps you understand your connection with the other person. You become aware of what you miss, what you don't miss, what hurts you, what comforts you, and what your heart is still holding on to. Silence shows you whether the bond was strong enough to survive stillness, whether the love was deep enough to exist without words, and whether the relationship was meaningful enough to occupy your thoughts even when there is no communication. In silence, feelings that were uncertain become certain, and feelings that were hidden become visible. Silence, with all its simplicity, becomes a powerful form of healing. It releases emotional tension, reduces mental noise, and brings peace to places inside you that were crowded with confusion. It calms the storms you never spoke about, softens the anger you carried, and reminds you that your heart deserves rest, understanding, and compassion. Silence resets the emotional energy between two people, giving them the space to reflect, to reconnect, or to gently let go. In the end, silence is not a sign of weakness, not a sign of disinterest, not a sign of failure. It is a reset, a breath, a pause that the heart needs in order to return stronger, clearer, calmer, and wiser. Silence is the emotional reset that transforms confusion into clarity, chaos into understanding, and noise into truth. Silence, when it enters a connection between two people at the same moment, becomes more than the absence of conversation, more than a pause in communication, and more than a temporary emotional distance. It becomes a powerful test, a quiet examination of the relationship's strength, a slow unveiling of what was real, what was fragile, what was strong, and what was only pretending to be strong. In silence, the connection is stripped bare, exposed, and revealed for what it truly is, not what you wished it would be, not what you forced it to be, and not what you imagined it to be. When words stop, intentions become visible. When communication pauses, commitment appears. When two people step back at the same time, the truth steps forward. Silence has the ability to separate genuine bonds from artificial ones, emotional truth from emotional habit, and real attachment from temporary companionship. Anyone can stay when the conversations are effortless, when the energy is fun, when the emotions are constantly fed. But silence exposes who remains when nothing is feeding the connection, when nothing is sustaining it, when nothing is distracting from the real state of the relationship. If the relationship weakens in silence, collapses in silence, or disappears completely in silence, it means the bond was already fragile, already unstable, already dependent on noise, attention, or constant emotional stimulation. Silence does not break strong connections. It only reveals which connections were pretending to be strong. Many relationships survive arguments, survive misunderstandings, survive distance, but they fall apart when the noise fades, because noise was the only thing holding them together. On the other hand, if the relationship grows stronger during silence, if the bond remains intact, if the connection survives the quiet, it means the foundation was built on something real, understanding, respect, sincerity, emotional depth, and genuine care. Silence becomes the space where real love breathes, where real loyalty stands, where real commitment stays alive without being fed by constant communication. When a bond is real, silence becomes peaceful, not threatening. It becomes a pause, not an ending. It becomes clarity, not confusion. Silence also reveals emotional priorities. It shows who thinks about you even when they don't speak, who values you even when they don't express it, who misses you even when they keep their distance, and who remembers you even when life is busy. Silence exposes where you truly stand in someone's heart. If they check on you after the silence, they care. If they return with understanding instead of blame, they value the connection. If they use the silence to reflect rather than to replace, they were emotionally invested all along. But silence also shows the other side, who is only there for convenience, who was only there for attention, who was only there for the entertainment of constant communication. When silence enters, those who were never truly connected simply fade away because they were never rooted deeply enough to stay. Silence removes the emotional noise that made temporary people look permanent. It reveals the true weight of the relationship, heavy enough to stay grounded or light enough to drift away. Silence tests patience, and patience reflects emotional maturity. Silence tests loyalty, and loyalty reflects depth. Silence tests intention, and intention reflects truth. It is during silence that you discover how much emotional effort the other person is willing to make, how much understanding they offer, how much forgiveness they carry, and how much space they give for healing rather than blaming. Silence is the moment that uncovers whether both hearts are willing to return, willing to rebuild, willing to try again, or whether the chapter is ready to close. In the end, silence does not destroy strong connections. Silence reveals them. And silence does not harm weak connections. Silence exposes them. Silence tests the strength of the bond, not to punish you, but to show you what was real, what was temporary, what was fragile, and what was worth holding on to. Silence, when it settles between people at the same time, does not come to confuse, does not come to punish, does not come to distance. It comes to guide. It arrives to open a new path, a clearer path, a more honest path, a path that could not be seen when words were loud, emotions were chaotic, and thoughts were tangled. Silence becomes the bridge between the past and the future, between what was and what will be, between holding on and letting go, between confusion and clarity. It creates a space where next direction becomes visible slowly, quietly, gently. In the noise of life, it is easy to lose your way. In constant communication, it is easy to ignore the deeper truth. In emotional rush, it is easy to make decisions from fear, from ego, from insecurity. But silence removes the noise, removes the ego, removes the pressure. Silence slows everything down so the heart can see where it truly wants to go, where it deserves to go, where it is ready to go. Silence becomes the emotional map that leads both people toward a healthier future, either a future together or a future apart. During silence, the mind begins to organize what was scattered. You start to see patterns you missed, lessons you ignored, warnings you avoided, and possibilities you never imagined. Silence becomes a teacher showing you what needs to change, what needs to end, what needs to heal, and what needs to begin. It reveals the emotional areas that were neglected, the boundaries that were crossed, and the desires that were suppressed. With every quiet moment, clarity grows. Clarity about what you feel, what you need, what you expect, and what you cannot accept anymore. Silence also gives both people a chance to heal without pressure. Healing requires space, patience, stillness, and honesty, things that cannot exist in constant conversation or heated emotions. Silence allows wounds to close, disappointment to settle, anger to soften, and confusion to fade. It gives time for forgiveness to rise naturally, not forcefully, and for understanding to form without defensiveness. Healing in silence prepares the relationship for whatever comes next: reconnection, reinvention, or release. And when the heart heals, it becomes wiser. When the mind settles, it becomes clearer. When the emotions calm, they become truthful. That wisdom is what shapes the next chapter. Some relationships return even stronger after silence because the space revealed what truly mattered, what was worth protecting, and what should never be taken for granted again. In these cases, silence becomes the reset that saved the connection, the break that restored it, the pause that strengthened it. Other relationships gently dissolve during silence, not out of anger, not out of failure, not out of blame, but because silence revealed that the emotional journey together has reached its natural end. Silence helps you identify when to let go gracefully, peacefully, respectfully. It prepares your heart for the next chapter by closing the current one with clarity, not confusion. It shows you that endings can be soft, not painful, and that moving forward can be an act of self-love, not abandonment. Silence also reveals direction through emotions. If you feel peace, the chapter is closing. If you feel longing, the chapter is paused. If you feel clarity, the chapter is understood. If you feel renewed hope, the chapter still has life. This is how silence builds the path forward, not with force, but with quiet certainty. It aligns the heart with truth, aligns the mind of wisdom, and aligns life with purpose. It creates the emotional distance needed to see reality without distortion, to understand the relationship without illusion, and to move forward without regret. In the end, silence becomes the architect of your next steps. It clears the fog, it opens the way, it prepares the heart, and it shapes destiny with more honesty than words ever could. Silence creates the path forward, a path built with clarity, with healing, with acceptance, and with truth. Silence, though often misunderstood, is one of the most meaningful forms of communication two people can experience. When both hearts go quiet at the same time, it is not emptiness, not punishment, not abandonment. It is a turning point. A moment where truth rises, emotions reset, bonds are tested, and the path forward becomes clearer than it has ever been. In that shared stillness, you begin to understand what mattered, what was missing, what was fragile, and what was real. You see yourself, you see them, and you see the relationship with an honesty that noise never allowed. Silence becomes the teacher that speaks without words, the healer that works without touch, the guide that leads without force. Whether silence brings you back together with newfound clarity or gently separates your paths with acceptance and peace, it always delivers you to the truth you needed to face. It clears the emotional clutter, reveals the depth of your connection, and prepares your heart for the chapter ahead, stronger, wiser, calmer, and more grounded. Silence is not the end of a story. Silence is the moment the real story begins.